Hey, architecture firm owners and emerging leaders. Get ready for unparalleled insight into the development of a world-class architecture firm and a worldwide organization driving the digital transformation of the design and construction industry. With Build Smart, the podcast that's changing how our profession operates. We share the incredible stories behind innovation in the building industry with my friend and co-host, Patrick McLeamy, FAIA, former CEO of the international architecture firm, HOK.
You know, Yamasaki's office or firm lasted during his lifetime. And when he passed away, I think that was the end of the Yamasaki office. Helmut did not want that. He wanted a firm that would live out and grow beyond the founders.
In Season 1, discover the untold stories behind HOK's meteoric rise, from 150 employees in St. Louis to a powerhouse with over 1,900 staff members and 27 offices worldwide.
You know, they weren't as polite as the Kojima people. That was just boom. And anytime you have a creditor, whether it's Kojima or the bank, that wants their money, unless you can raise money someplace else, you are out of business.
Bankrupt. And hold on tight for Season 2, where Patrick takes us on a new adventure as chairman of Building Smart International, shaping the future of digital transformation in the design, construction, and operation of built assets.
Ian Howell, Ken Harold, and I, Ken was my technical representative from HOK. The three of us took a tour of Europe of 5 cities in 5 days. Very busy time.
Simply follow the link in the show notes to subscribe to Build Smart now and uncover lessons that will transform you and your architecture firm. Hey, architecture firm owners and emerging leaders. Get ready for unparalleled insight into the development of a world-class architecture firm and a worldwide organization driving the digital transformation of the design and construction industry. With Build Smart, the podcast that's changing how our profession operates. We share the incredible stories behind innovation in the building industry with my friend and co-host, Patrick McLeamy, FAIA, former CEO of the international architecture firm, HOK.
You know, Yamasaki's office or firm lasted during his lifetime. And when he passed away, I think that was the end of the Yamasaki office. Helmut did not want that. He wanted a firm that would live out and grow beyond the founders.
In Season 1, discover the untold stories behind HOK's meteoric rise, from 150 employees in St. Louis to a powerhouse with over 1,900 staff members and 27 offices worldwide.
You know, they weren't as polite as the Kojima people. That was just boom. And anytime you have a creditor, whether it's Kojima or the bank, that wants their money, unless you can raise money someplace else, you are out of business.
Bankrupt. And hold on tight for Season 2, where Patrick takes us on a new adventure as chairman of Building Smart International, shaping the future of digital transformation in the design, construction, and operation of built assets.
Ian Howell, Ken Harold, and I, Ken was my technical representative from HOK. The three of us took a tour of Europe of 5 cities in 5 days. Very busy time.
Simply follow the link in the show notes to subscribe to Build Smart now and uncover lessons that will transform you and your architecture firm. My name is Mark R. LePage, and you are listening to Entre Architect Podcast, where each week I speak with inspiring, passionate people who share their knowledge and expertise, all to help you build a better business as a small firm entrepreneur architect. Based in Detroit, Michigan, Emily Hall, president of CVG, leads the firm's operations and strategic vision, focusing on aligning resources to deliver exceptional service to CVG clients. With over 20 years of experience in architectural marketing and business development, she leverages her MBA and design expertise to help architects' brands grow authentically. Her passion is for blending brand strategy with a firm's unique personality It distinguishes her approach. And in this episode, Emily joins us to explore the art and strategy behind naming an architecture business. This is a topic that comes up all the time in our community. We're going to dive deep into what makes a brand name memorable, how it reflects a firm's values, and why a thoughtful naming process can help set the tone for success. Emily's been here before, episode 65, one of the top 100, first 100 episodes. Emily was 65, How to Successfully Rebrand a Studio. That's an evergreen episode, so go back to that, episode 65, and listen to that. This is episode 591. Emily Hall, welcome back to Entre Architect Podcast.
Thank you, Mark. It's very nice to be here. And by saying that this is the 500-something episode, I feel so old.
No, it's experience. It's experience.
Yes.
We only get better with age, so we're like wine.
Thank you.
This is going to be a fun conversation because you are passionate about this topic of naming. I am passionate about this topic of naming, but I want to learn more about it. I've done some research when I was naming my firm, when I named the companies, Entre Architect and Gable Media. I love that process, but I want to also talk about how architects come to that process, because so many architects just use their own name as their brand, which we could do that, and we could talk about the pros and cons of that. But I love the idea of not naming the firm after the founders. And so we'll talk about that. Before we do that, I want to know more about you. I'd love for you to share your story, your origin story. When did you discover your passion for what you do today, and who and what inspired you to do that?
Oh, sure. I have an interesting origin story, I think. I have held almost every position in a small architecture firm other than architect. I have really kind of seen the way firms operate from all different angles. And it's really kind of informed my knowledge about the industry, but also understanding what works and what doesn't work from multiple perspectives. And I was really fortunate to work for two different small architecture firms, growing small architecture firms in my early career. The first one, DBVW Architects, helped them rebrand. They shortened their name to initials. We can talk about that if you're interested. Another firm after that was Union Studio, who also brought me on to help rebrand the firm. So I had that experience with two different small firms. And what's interesting about both of those firms is they were very successful businesses. They had charismatic leadership. They were profitable. I believe knew what they were doing. They might not say that they did, but I think after working with so many small architecture firms, some of them really do have the special sauce, and both of these firms did. So I feel like from a mentorship point of view, I got to see how you could run a very fun small firm with a really great culture while also being profitable. And people actually enjoyed coming to work. We laughed a lot in both of those firms. And that meant a lot to me because I felt like I was kind of exposed to firms who had this special sauce. And when I joined CVG, a lot of my inspiration was, wow, could I kind of bring this perspective to other small firms who either have it and want to, develop qualities that make them unique, or just want to get closer to it, just to be a strong, fun, profitable firm where people like to work. That's what makes me passionate about the work that I do.
What was your initial role at CVG, and what are you doing there today?
I think my first title here was Marketing and Messaging Specialist, and now I'm president, working with an amazing team of 21 people now. I think I was the third hire, so there were three of us at the time on full-time, Todd, me, and Rena. Yeah, so now we've got a really talented marketing team and a creative studio that focuses exclusively on branding and graphics and identity. And I'm not doing as much with the marketing team. I'm certainly connected to what they're doing, but I do drop in and help firms with naming. That still remains a passion and a specialization.
Before we jump into naming, can you just explain for anybody who doesn't know what CVG does, both on the investment side as well as the services side?
Sure. So we help small and mid-sized architecture firms be better businesses. And that means morphing around firms to fill in the gaps, to help guide them strategically and advise them on business decisions on how to be a stronger firm. And that includes areas of finance and operations and ownership transition, marketing, business development, leadership, emerging leaders training, firm culture, recruiting, all of the things that really aren't architecture. And we have a team that has various specializations in those areas, and we work closely with firms on whatever they need to help them achieve their goals. So we could do that as a la carte services. If you call and you just want a strategic plan, you just want an assessment, give us a call. Or if you really want us to help walk you through the process of being, the long-term process of being a stronger firm that can take years, we partner with firms to do that as well. For the purpose of this podcast, we also have a creative studio that does a la carte branding, either does branding work for our partner firms, or also we can give you a proposal if you want to change your name or if you want to keep your name and do a brand refresh or a new website. We offer those services.
I know through being involved with CBG actually invested in Entre Architect when we first launched, helped us tremendously, helped build our brand, Entre Architect, help us build that name, the logo. And I know that many of the firms that you have worked with throughout the years has gone through the rebranding and renaming process. So you have lots of experience in that process. Can you take us through a basic overview of what that process looks like when a firm comes to you with a name that either you have, as a firm, CBG, has identified as something that should be discussed and maybe rebranded, or the firm comes to you saying, hey, we want a new brand? What is the process from that point all the way through, just sort of frameworks? We could have a conversation around it. What are the steps of renaming a firm?
Sure. That's a good question. And the number one focus is why, right? To make sure that firms are renaming or rebranding for the right reasons, because there are plenty of firms that think that this is an answer to solve business development challenges. Like, I'd rather design my way out of not making calls, right?
Right, exactly. Rename it and the phone will start ringing.
Yeah, exactly. So just make sure that it's for the right reasons, that you're not giving away brand equity or not taking advantage of, I'll just say brand equity, right? Some firms have the brand equity that you really want to keep and maintain. Others, that's another conversation, right? How strong is it? Is it what they think it is? And what's their position in the marketplace? And how might a new name or a rebrand influence that position in the marketplace? So the why is where we start. And the exploration into mission, vision, values, right? Making sure that those are clearly defined, understanding the reason for the change, and then using that to inform a creative brief, right? Which you would do for a new name. I have naming briefs often, which is separate from the rebrand or creative brief. It's the beginning of the process, which is, I've got some great questions that we ask, who the firm is, what it does, who the brand serves, very briefly. What do you want from the name? Why do you want it? What don't you want? What does it need to communicate? What does a new name need to communicate? Distill those values and that mission and those services kind of down to the core. Does it need to include formal names and services? What's the personality of the brand, of the name? Are there qualities that your brand definitely is not? What does it really need to communicate, right? Getting into the core of that. And then that's where you've got your premise that you start to develop names. And also, of course, competitive research is part of that too. But once you have that brief, you can weigh all of your other decision-making against it, right? It's not just loose opinions of different partners floating out there. You can honestly say, does this name answer the problem addressed in the brief? Is this the best possible answer? So that makes it a little bit more objective and helps guide the decision-making. So first step, why are you doing this? Why do you feel you need to? Second step, okay, let's talk about mission, vision, values. Third step, let's develop your creative brief. With that, decide who the stakeholders are, who the decision makers are going to be in the process. Make sure they sign on to their accountability in the process, right? If you're going to come in and change the direction, you got to be at every meeting, right?
Yeah.
You don't come in halfway through when everybody's done all the hard work and, veto a name. Of course, some firm leaders reserve the right to do that, but as everybody in the design world knows, it takes a lot to get to certain milestones, and just got to make sure you're respecting that. So decide who's the ultimate decision maker. And then, let the team put on their thinking caps and come up with some ideas. And whether it's you doing that yourself as a firm owner, I'll give you some exercises, if you want to do that yourself, some places where I'd start. Or if you're just guiding and informing a team and waiting for brilliance to happen from another group of people, you could do that too. But that's basically the starting point. And then the ideas start happening. And as with architecture, constructive feedback is valued, right? If you don't like a name, the best thing you can do is explain why you don't like it, what direction you'd rather go in. The worst possible meetings are the ones where your client just says, no, next, no, next. And you put like 5 weeks into coming up with 6 really amazing ideas and next.
Yeah. I think some people think that the naming process is really just the last step of what you discussed, right?
Mm-hmm.
The brainstorming process where it's just a list of names and then you just pick them. And so saying no to one is it's just the one on the list. They don't realize that you've spent months of process to get to that step. Early on in what you were talking about, you talked about making sure that you understand why and brand equity. Could you talk a little bit about brand equity and maybe a name that may not be the best name, but it has a lot of brand equity? Could you talk about what that means and why a name that has lots of brand equity may be better than changing it?
Yeah, okay. Let's talk about SOM, right? I would never say rebrand SOM.
Yes.
Talk about a brand with equity that, is an acronym, which I would never recommend. Sometimes that winds up happening. But yeah, they've built an international reputation with a very strong history. And there would be no reason to do that unless they have internal reasons that I'm not privy to. But when we're talking about brand equity, I think that's a really good example, right? And there are plenty of those big acronym firm names, HOK and a whole bunch of them, NBBJ, Hanso. But some of those just have really strong equity. And we're talking about smaller firms, clearly you don't have millions of dollars in advertising and an international presence. So then you have to think, how much brand awareness and equity do we really have? Are we at the right point in our growth process to do this? Because, as we all know, growth is like stair step, and kind of where are you in that process, and does renaming fit? Do enough people know about you so that you could do a redirect and change your name and that would be okay versus, just starting out, you're fine. You can pick whatever name you want and build that. Or if you're quite small and thinking about growth, it's another good time to rebrand. If you're on your way up and just starting to get recognition in a market, you might want to stick with your original name until you reach a point where you've plateaued growth a little bit and people know who you are. They're gaining awareness enough that, again, if you decide to rebrand, they're not going to completely be confused and not be able to find you ever again. So I'm sure that there are I know for a fact from being in school that there are clear ways to put a valuation on brand equity. But when you're a small firm, that's not really what you're doing, right? You're really taking the temperature of your marketplace.
So what would be some reasons to rebrand and rename?
Sure. So expansion or change of leadership would be the number one, right? If you just have your name on your shingle and you want to grow leadership or you want to appeal to emerging leaders and you're thinking about growth kind of beyond yourself or you and your partner or you and your 2 partners or whatever, you start to understand that you're not just going to keep tacking names on to the firm, right? We know when we see that, that's not ideal. So that would be a great reason to rebrand. Maybe moving into new markets and you have a name that's limiting, say some Hall Kitchen Solutions, right? And you want to move into broader renovation work, or a medical design company and you want to start doing corporate law firms, or, and that's part of your name, or even geographically, right? If you are named after your city, and you want to grow into different markets, that might be a good reason. Maybe it's kind of a highly competitive scenario and your name isn't differentiating you enough. Maybe it sounds like one of your competitors and there's confusion. That might be another one. It's also an opportunity to refresh and reintroduce yourself to the marketplace. So, names can become stale. Firms can become stale. And, you have to realize that there's a certain point where your name isn't working for you. And that's an introspective decision.
In terms of the actual name, what are your thoughts on naming a firm after the founders? And probably in the same conversation on the initials of the firm, right? The acronym. So what are your thoughts on that?
If it can be avoided, I would say avoid it, but it depends on what your individual goals are, right? Like, what do you want your firm to become? If it's really about, your design process, and you're not expecting to grow too much, and you're not focused on getting new partners and emerging leaders who want to stay with your firm for the long term and eventually become owners, if you're more in the sole proprietor zone, that's a good choice. A lot of firms, I think, decide on their name just because they want to get started and don't want to go through this process. There is some value in recognition or different reasons for that. And that's fine too. I just say, if you have the choice, I would say it's limiting. If your name's on the door, every client's going to want to talk to you, right? And they're going to feel, if they're assigned to anybody else and they don't get to meet you, that they are a C-class client.
Yeah. And very difficult in succession in order to bring on new leadership or sell the firm to a firm in another time. To sell a firm that has the names after the founders becomes a very complicated process.
Yeah.
You talked about, in the terms of the framework and the steps that you take, the creative brief. That sounded a very large portion of the process. Could you walk us through what a creative brief is and how that applies to a naming process?
Sure. It helps understand what you need the new name to do for you. It frames the process. We are here. We need to be here. We expect the name to be able to do this for us. Certainly, it's not the be-all, end-all, because we all know that with branding, the name is just one piece of the puzzle, right? You're going to have layers of graphics and identity and colors and imagery that supports your brand. So it's never just the name. But from the starting point, the brief really does have to explain what you expect this word or this group of words to do for you, and also reflect your awareness of the marketplace, your position in the marketplace, your competition, and where you want to be, and how this is going to help you get there ultimately. A series of questions. What do you need it to communicate? You can have as many people kind of chime in on the creative brief as possible, but you as a firm owner and your partners really need to evaluate what's important to you.
And you talked about making sure everybody's on board with the process and the rebrand and the name. All the decision makers need to be at least aware of what's happening and approving steps along the way, right? Because you talked about how a firm leader not involved can come in the middle of the process and just derail the entire process. So the creative brief and making sure everybody on board, that's sort of an integrated step, right?
Absolutely. And same with mission, vision, values. That's all part of it. It's just getting everybody to the same starting line. It's really important to the process, just like early design stages. And, when you're working through concepts, you really have to know what problem you're solving.
Yeah. And we've talked about vision, mission, and values quite a bit on the podcast. That's something that I'm constantly reminding architects that they need to focus on. So many start firms without doing that. Here's another reason why that's important to have that as part of your business, which should already be done before you even get to the process of rebranding. It should have been done a long time ago. You've done so many of these now at CVG. Can you give us some examples of firms you've worked with and sort of take us through those steps with those firms? Would that be okay?
Absolutely. And it's been a learning process for me. And I think the number one part of the learning process, just as we get into this, is helping people make decisions, right? Like, isn't that the psychology that we all deal with as designers and in this creative field? Is you might think something's the best possible solution, and then it comes back, no, it's not. How do you value that and help inform the decision-making process? So it's not just an argumentative unproductive conversation. So I've learned a lot about that, about how you frame the choices to help make decision-making easier.
Let's take a quick break to say thank you to our sponsors for their support of this episode. Architects, listen up. Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? Regardless if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or if you're just a human who lives in this world and is going through a hard time, therapy can give you the tools to approach your life in a very different way. I know this community of small firm architects very well, and I see many of you struggling. That's why I reached out to this episode's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote. And by filling out just a few questions, BetterHelp can match you with a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There's a link in the show notes. It's betterhelp.com/architect. Just use that link, betterhelp.com/architect. Clicking that link helps support this podcast, but it also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. So you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. If you need someone to talk to, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the show notes or visit betterhelp.com/architect. That's betterhelp.com/architect. Thank you to BetterHelp for supporting this podcast and for supporting our community of small firm architects. ARCAT's Spec Wizard is the tool that will help you save time writing specifications. Going through the manufacturer's specification line by line to find the right product leads to frustration and errors. And that's where Spec Wizard comes in. It's a free, patented tool that allows you to select products and options error-free and generate a 3-part specification in minutes. Go to arcat.com, that's ARCAT.com, and try Spec Wizard today. Please visit our sponsors today and thank them. Thank them for supporting you, the EntreArchitect community. Have you worked with firms that resisted a name change, where they came to you and you're like, you should change your name? And they're like, no, we really like that name.
Yes. And I don't push that much harder. I give them reasons, but
it's up to them.
I don't want to fight an uphill battle. I can give them reasons, but it's just like telling somebody they need to lose weight, right? You got to be committed to it and agree with it in order for it to be successful. I'm not going to twist somebody's arm to change their name if they don't want to.
Yeah.
So
share some successful examples at TVG.
Sure. One of the first renames I did, well, for one, Springhouse was probably the very first.
Yeah. Sherry Scott, one of my favorite people in the world.
I can't claim any influence on that name because Sherry came to us with it. She had a Springhouse on her property. It just was a natural, so I can't not state that one. But one of the interesting was EDI Inc., Environmental Dynamics Incorporated. I think that's what it stands for, out of Albuquerque. And we rebranded to Equiterra. So this was a firm that was on the cutting edge of regenerative architecture and design. And that's a made-up name, right? So that was taking equilibrium and terra as balanced earth.
Yeah, great name.
I thought that was a very nice name. And it has a good mouthfeel too, Equiterra.
Yes.
Kind of goes off the tongue. So that was a fun one.
And a perfect example of their prior name, EDI. It was hard for you to recall what it even meant.
Yeah.
Right, the EDI, even now, having worked with them all those years,
yeah,
I'm sure you got it right, but you had to sort of think about what it stood for. And Equiterra, just like, boom, it's the great name.
Yeah.
And you could very easily understand what that means if you think about that word. It's a great name.
It has a friendly sound to it. I'm a fan of that word. Another one is Vivo Architecture, VIVO, out of Boston. And they do primarily life science work and labs and biotech. And their former name, their original name was R.E. Deneen Architects and Planners. And the new generation did not include the person with that name. And they were ready to move forward. And in music, vivo means with life and vigor. In life science, it means taking place in a living organism. To the firm, it represents the life and movement they find in the iterative design process, the ongoing evolution of growth of the firm, and a reminder they create useful spaces for people at the forefront of innovation. And their tagline is bringing design to life. That's really nice because when you're looking in a laboratory, something can be either in vitro or in vivo, right? And then it has this dual meaning of this kind of vibrancy and liveliness. So I thought that was really good. That was a very successful rename and rebrand for that firm.
I love when names and logos and the overall brand just vibe, right? They all connect. The names and the copy, the overall look of it, the graphics, when they all start to work, that's when a rebranding is really successful.
Yeah, I agree. And it's also important to remember that as you're looking at firm names, right, that there's going to be so much to support that brand. As I said earlier, in the colors, in the logo, in the tagline, and the messaging. So what might not be a convincing word is just going to get so much help, right? A good example of that is a construction management firm that we rebranded last year. And their name was Gen Con, their original name. And again, another example of a young group of emerging, new principals that wanted to look forward. And Gen Con is, you can agree, it's pretty generic.
Yeah, there's probably 1,000 Gen Cons in the United States.
Yeah. And the rename, we wound with Gage, G-A-G-E. And Gage means pledge or oath and is a guarantee of good faith. Its meaning reflects the company's culture and how deeply they value their team, clients, and partners. And also play on Gauge, G-A-U-G-E. It communicates attention and a watchful eye to precision and accuracy. Gauge is just a nice word, but that's an example of one of many words. We worked hard to arrive at the right word, and they were an amazing team to work with. They're super fun and super open-minded. But that was one that was proposed kind of initially, and we eventually came back to it after a lot of different iterations. And honestly, they liked it, but I'm not sure that they were as sold on it as after all of the identity work took place, and they could really see it and visualize the strength of the word. And if you look on our website and kind of see the colors and the font choice, there's tons of strength there. And the word also has that mouthfeel of being just a very strong and memorable word.
What are some common mistakes that are made when firms are being named?
Do you mean in the process or in the result, or both?
Both. What should architects avoid in the process and in the name they choose?
Sure. Trendiness. I think we know it when we see it, right? I think you can tell when something is trendy or feels like it was of the last decade. Asking too many opinions.
Interesting.
You got your decision makers, they know the firm really well. Sometimes putting it out to too many people, friends and family. The interesting things with naming is if you're not part of the context or the word choice, you're not in the room when the explanation or the description or pitch is being made for a certain word, you're not really understanding, you haven't read the brief. You don't know the reason for it. You're coming in kind of blind, right? You don't really know what the graphics are going to be. And it's just so easy to react negatively and like, that sounds like a fabric softener. It's just so easy to to react that way. And then you just get a whole bunch of negative voices in the process. It's very rare that somebody says, oh my gosh, that's perfect. You nailed it. I love it. So that whole design, and brainstorming by committee, let's all sit in a room together and come up with a name. Oh my gosh, I can't think of anything more painful than that. You really have to brainstorm on your own, come back together, have a good process for evaluating ideas. So making sure that you're not designing by committee or not naming by committee, right? Not asking too many opinions, not floating it out there, because all you're going to hear, most of what you're going to hear is going to be negative. Look in the Urban Dictionary to make sure the name doesn't mean something you're not aware of.
Good advice.
You might want to look it up in some, common other languages. Think about the acronym, right? Assembled Studio Structures isn't going to look too great in meeting notes.
Right. Yeah.
People will abbreviate your name, and that's just going to happen in meeting notes and whatever else. So you have to direct that abbreviation or be aware of what it might be. Mixed meanings, right? Something you might not be aware of, but somebody's like, oh my God, that means, I don't think it means what you think it means. Yeah, and trendiness, really. Like you want a classic name. You want something that's, unless your whole brief is to be super contemporary and change your name every 5 years, you could do that. But I don't know why.
When you go through the process of brainstorming and coming up with all the different names, typically how many names are you coming up with for a firm rebrand?
5 or 6 per iteration.
So that's how many you're presenting, or that's how many you're actually coming up with?
Oh no,
Like on the list?
hundreds of names. That's not what you're
So
presenting.
you're just brainstorming everything. You're just listing everything that you could possibly, you did all that other work, right? So now you have all of that information to lead you. Now you're brainstorming based on that information, and you just brainstorm every word that possibly comes to mind.
Well, there are exercises, and we can talk a little more.
Let's do that. What does that process look like?
We can talk about that, but I don't want to forget the final and most frustrating stage, which is checking for trademark and other usage, because that's the worst part of the process when you nail it and you got the perfect name and you look and it's taken, and then you're back to the drawing board. So rest assured, if I present 5 or 6 names to you, they're going to be vetted to a certain degree, not through a lawyer or a trademark lawyer, but at least vetted to a certain degree. So it takes a lot to get to those 5 or 6 names. Anyway, so my favorite place to start is free-form association. And you can think of firm names as being, compound words, imagery, senses, cultural inspiration, metaphor, similes, the whole thing, right? So, all these options for words in the world. But the free-form association is to really write, take a half an hour. Okay, I'm going to back up for a second. And before we talk about brainstorming, something that I like to do is take a few different people and give them some of these different exercises to do so that, they go home with an assignment and come back with a certain amount of names.
Yep.
Then you're just getting fresher, more ideas, which is fun. That's what CVG did with our team. Right. So that's something I'd left out earlier. But the free-form association, step 1 to brainstorming, half an hour, write down, read through the brief, read through your firm's mission, vision, and values, and just write down all the words that you think of when you think of your firm. Senses, metaphors, similes, values, analogies, things like, trust, it's going to be a rock. Trust, what are the symbols of trust? What are these different symbols and feelings? Write them all down until you get tired. And then take that list and circle some of the ideas that spark interest. And then take that and run it through various online dictionaries and word finders. And I can give you and your audience a list of those. I think I have about 12 of those that you can really go down the rabbit hole. It's actually kind of fun. Of all the associated words that you might not have ever thought of, but people actually design websites that associate words. It's really fun.
So just before I forget, you can send those to me and we'll add those to the show notes. So people can go to the show notes for this episode and they can find all those resources.
Yes. And the ones that I use, I'm sure there are other ones too. I also collect glossaries and dictionaries. So if I'm ever at a used bookstore, I have a pretty interesting assortment of things like that. But you can find that stuff online and spend some time doing that. You could spend hours and hours and hours going through all of these. I would say grab 4 of these different word finder resources at a time and just go through and start spinning off tangents, interesting words, names, whatever. So start doing that. Circle the ones that are interesting. I like coming back every day to the brainstorming group, sharing your words, posting them, emailing them to each other so that people can think about words they might not have thought of, and they can start riffing on those words. So it's really kind of an associative thing. So you can have a lot from that. You look them up in foreign languages. You can make compound words, right? You can start having 2 short words, and you're like, oh, these 2 actually can get mixed together, like Equiterra, to create a new meaning, right? You can add prefixes and suffixes. That's something that you see sometimes as like ology or osophy, ness, lab, the suffixes that you add. There's a firm name that I love called Tremendousness. I think that's just so fun, right?
Yeah.
But, you can add prefixes and suffixes to make it your own. Characters and cultural references is another exercise, right? Think about books, fictional, historic characters, songs, song titles, plays, things and places and people that illustrate a theme, right? Like Captain Ahab or Patagonia, right, is a really great brand. It's really, and I'm pretty sure it's not based in Patagonia, but it sure evokes a feeling that we all kind of get the sense of it, right?
Right.
Yellow Brick Road, things like that are common enough culturally that people completely get it, right? It's in the zeitgeist. So there are those, I would say last resort, but geography and places. So if you think about, where your street is, your building has a name, if there's like a theme in your city, unique theme to your space, like Springhouse, right? That's a good example of that.
Yeah.
Landmarks around you. And that can be limiting. I know you're going to say that because if you would ever move or grow, you're not on Locust Way anymore, right? But an example of that would be Union Studios rebranding. So they were originally on Union Street, right? So that was natural. It's a nice word, but it also has a double meaning. So when Union Studio moved to Mathewson Street, it didn't matter.
Wasn't a problem.
It was not a problem. Union had another meaning, and I thought that was pretty elegant. We work with a firm named Red Barn Architecture that started in their barn. They do residential work, a New England firm north of Boston. And I don't think they work in their red barn anymore, but it sure is evocative as an image, right?
Yes.
So there are ways that you could pick places and landmarks and make them your own. So that's just a few different exercises, mold it all into one. But I'll give you the list of the name generators or the word generators, and you can really play with that a lot. And it becomes pretty clear. You start circling the things that have ideas that have legs, and then bring it to the group, and then they can riff off those things.
So you bring to the group 4 or 5 of the hundreds that you come up with, and then have conversations around that process. How do you actually come to the final decision?
Well, we're talking about the brainstorming group, not the client group. Right. Okay. So usually there's consensus, right? First of all, we check availability. We think about how it might look. We think about mouthfeel. We think about all the different things that make a name a success or not. And one of the exercises I like doing is saying, let's call the team at blank, right? Like if your clients were saying, oh, let's call the team at Red Barn. Does it sound normal or does it sound really weird and hokey? Let's call the team at the Office of Existential Magic, let's call the team at OGM. That doesn't work as well, right? So think about how that rolls off the tongue. And that's a really good exercise. Does that sound familiar or not? And then start kind of thinking about replacing their name. Like if you read a firm's about page or their mission statement and you replaced the new firm name with the old one, does it make sense? Does it ring true? Does it roll off the tongue? But most importantly, you're looking at the creative brief, right? You're saying, does it do what it needs to do?
So you go back to the creative brief to make sure that it's fulfilling those requirements.
Yeah. And then typically when I present names to a client group, make sure to put it in the context or put one of their project images behind it. Just start to put it in their context and just put the word up, another slide with the explanation, let them kind of sit with it. And often I say, please, let's not come to a conclusion right now. Let's just kind of go home and think about it and use it in different sentences and see how it feels to you before you reject it or love it. And often people change their minds and say, at first I didn't like it, but I thought about it, I liked it. Or at first this was my favorite, and oddly enough, here's the dark horse.
How often is the first reaction negative?
90% of the time.
Yeah, that's what I would expect. Just because it's different, right? It's not something they knew. It's not something they have heard before.
Yeah. And that's where you have to start the process by really reminding everybody that it's going to sound so weird at first. It's like renaming your child. It's just not going to be comfortable. Even if you come up with the best name in the world, it's going to feel weird. So there's that. So there's that open-mindedness aspect of it. Remember, this can look the way you want. You're going to have a logo. You're going to have the colors that you choose. It's messaging, explaining it. There's a lot more to it than just the word.
Is there anything else that we should talk about before we wrap things up?
Do you want to talk about domain names really quickly?
Sure.
Okay. The only comment I really have on this is don't let the domain name availability influence your name decision, because there are tons of creative ways to get a unique domain name, right? You can add a verb like call so-and-so, hey so-and-so, designed by so-and-so, or your name and then a great suffix. There's so many different ways. So don't let the domain name availability stop you.
So know the answer to that question, but don't let a good name go by because you can't get the domain name for that.
Because the most obvious name of just your company name isn't available. There are other ways to do that.
Yeah.
But you also want to avoid confusion, right? You want to go to Google. You want to make sure that your name doesn't point to another design firm in your state or in your city. First of all, that's very uncool. Second of all, often it's illegal. I mean, relative to trademark, you don't want to get a cease and desist, but you just want to check to make sure that your name really is truly unique and there's going to be no confusion. And then you might want to engage a trademark lawyer. Always consult your business attorneys about these things too, to make sure it's available not only in your state registry as a business that you can use, it's free. Check Google and check the USPTO database and a lawyer.
One other thought that just came to mind is AI, right? Because AI does so much today. How does AI fit into the process that we've been talking about today?
Well, it's on one of my lists. ChatGPT is on one of my lists in terms of a word generator. So you can do that. I've used it, but I've never arrived at a great conclusion from it. Anything that helps you get to another place and get beyond a mental block is helpful.
It's good for brainstorming and coming up with lots of names that may lead you somewhere else. But often what's coming out of an AI is very generic. And so it's unlikely that it's going to find the name that you use, but it may lead you to where you need to go to find the name that you will use.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule it out. And I mean, it's just anything that gets you thinking beyond your mental confines, right?
Last question before I ask my final question that I ask all my guests is, how important is a name? When you look at the overall process of branding and business structure and business strategy and the work that we do, where does the name land in terms of importance in all of that?
Well, I'm going to just say the brand is very important. And you can have a lame name, but a great brand. So it's not to be looked at singularly, right? It's part of a brand ecosystem. So I would say incredibly important, the brand.
The brand is incredibly important.
Everything is aligned and it sings, right? It's all pointing in the same direction.
Yeah. All right, last question. What's one thing a small firm architect can do today to build a better business for tomorrow?
Take a half an hour every day at the very least to focus on your business, to get your head out of your drawing sets, to stop being stressed out about the work that you are doing in that moment and the deadline you are facing in that moment, and think about business development. Think about your firm. If you have team members, walk around and see how they're doing. Check in with them. Just take a minute to lift up out of the detail of what you do every day to remember that you're a leader of a business and people around you care if you want to engage with them, and your clients care if you give them a call, and your business will be stronger if you make sure to focus on the business itself and the people around you.
Emily Hall is the president of CVG. You can learn more about CVG at charettvg.com. That's the website, is charettvg.com. We'll also have all the show notes, all the resources that we talked about today. Emily's going to send me a bunch of things, and we'll put those on the show notes. So go to the show notes for this episode and we'll have everything there. Emily, thank you for everything that you do in this profession. You have had a significant impact specifically on small firms and the success of this profession. So thank you for the work that you do specifically at CVG, and thank you for being here and sharing your knowledge about naming at Entre Architect Podcast.
Thank you so much, Mark. Appreciated being here.
If you liked this episode of Entre Architect Podcast, please share a link to this episode with a friend. Either just click the share button or highlight the URL and send the link to this episode with a friend, because that's how Entre Architect has grown to serve thousands more architects just like you throughout the 10 plus years of Entre Architect. That's how we've grown, architect to architect. So I would love for you to share this episode and all the episodes with one friend every week. We'd love that. And thank you to our sponsors for this episode. We don't have an episode if there's no sponsors, so thank you to our sponsors. Links to those sponsors, which you should go visit and click, and all the resources that we discussed today for this specific episode, they are all available at entrearchitect.com/podcast. Every episode that we've recorded is there, entrearchitect.com/podcast. Go click the links to the sponsors and say hello. Entre Architect is a member of the Gable Media Podcast Network. You should go visit that at gablemedia.com. That is the next evolution of interactive media and resources for the AEC community. You can now earn continuing education credits for listening to select episodes of this podcast, Entre Architect Podcast. Yes, AIA CEUs for listening to a podcast. It's there, and many other podcasts are there as well, and you can listen to all of them and get credit. Learn more about our program, Gable Members Program, at the gablemedia.com/members website. That's GABL media.com/members. And if you are a small firm architect, join us today at Entre Architect Network. That is the worldwide organization for small firm entrepreneur architects. If you own your own architecture firm, you are an entrepreneur architect. You are an Entre Architect. With weekly live group business coaching, we have business coaching there, monthly live business training with AIA CEUs, 2 a month, so 24 AIA credits per year, including 12 of those are HSWs. We have them in the membership. Business resources, all the resources you need to run your business, special session webinars, mastermind groups, and a thriving community of small firm architects just like you. Hundreds of architects are there waiting for you to join. So we provide the support and encouragement you need to succeed as a small firm architect. I know that you haven't been trained as a business person when you launched your firm. That's what we do. Come learn how to run a business at Entre Architect Network. And today you can go join right now for free for 30 days at this link, entrearchitect.com/30 days will give you free 30 days for membership. Go check it out at entrearchitect.com/30 days, and I will see you there. Thank you for listening to this episode of Entre Architect Podcast. My name is Mark R. LePage, and I want you to remember 3 words: love, learn, share. Have a great day.
Imagine earning continuing education credits while doing exactly what you're doing right now. Well, you can. Gable Media has revolutionized the way you earn your continuing education credits with a groundbreaking approach. Forget running around town and scouring the internet for credit-worthy courses. Fulfill your CE requirements effortlessly by listening to engaging podcasts just like the one you're listening to now. Our podcasts are designed to educate, entertain, and inspire, all in a user-friendly environment. But wait, there's more. Architects, Gable Media is also approved as an AIA continuing education services provider. Upon completion, we handle everything, from reporting your hours directly to the AIA to storing your certificates in your personal Gable Media profile for your self-reporting needs. So follow the link in the show notes and start earning your credits in the most innovative and entertaining way possible with Gable Media.
Attention architects and creative minds, get ready to supercharge your brand with Build Your Brand, the podcast that's unlocking the secrets of branding success for creatives. Hey there, it's Mark R. LePage, founder of Entre Architect, and I'm inviting you to join my friend, architect marketing expert Jeff Eccles at Build Your Brand podcast, where he explores the captivating stories of the world's top brands and transforms their lessons into powerful moves for small firm architects and creatives like you. In Season 1, Jeff shares the thrilling tale of Southwest Airlines, where he dissects their journey to the summit and distills it into strategies tailor-made for you.
It's important to keep in mind that companies like Southwest compete in the real world, just like you, and face real-world challenges, just like you. You might be surprised at how similar those challenges are to the struggles that you grapple with on a day-to-day basis.
Don't miss out on your blueprint for success. Subscribe, tune in, and let's build your brand together.
You may have noticed that the very best brands in the world are also known for having somewhat unique corporate cultures. That's often the glue that holds everything together when they encounter those rough spots.
We don't do it because it inconveniences the passengers to whom we are primarily dedicated, the short haul, frequent flyer.
Follow the link in the show notes to subscribe to Build Your Brand today. Remember, no matter the size, the journey's the same. Your brand's journey to the top starts here.